So earlier this week, we found out from from Paul St-Pierre Plamondon exactly what we could expect on day one if, in fact, the PQ were to form a government. They introduced a budget, and there's more to come, by the way. The leader of the PQ is Paul St-Pierre Plamondon. He's on the line right now. Mr. Plamondon, thanks so much for your time.
Good afternoon.
Let me begin. We all have questions here, so I want to get to as many as we possibly can. You said the other day, and I'm quoting from what you'd said in one of the press conferences that had been held, you mentioned the fact that, first of all, you cited Pauline Marois and François Legault in your online video, which you've produced, as having promoted the same idea as you are. But as has been pointed out, Pauline Marois famously said that the first 5 years of an independent Quebec would be a very difficult time. Do you not share that opinion anymore?
I didn't promote Pauline Marois in the video. I promoted Jacques Parizeau and François Legault, who both did that exercise of evaluating the financial capacity of Quebec of being a country. And we are citing in that new budget 4 recent studies that really specifically pertain on the economic performance in the first years of a new country. And the conclusions of those university studies is that for independences that are democratic and orderly, it triggers an acceleration of better performance from an economic standpoint than normal. That doesn't mean that we predict the future, but it means that we have a budget that minimally shows that an independent Quebec starts with a very advantageous financial situation as compared to European countries.
Okay, well, hold on a second. I didn't ask you about the budget. I'm asking you whether you agree with that assessment by Pauline Marois that the first, and she said 5 years, say the first 3 or 4 years, if Quebec was to become a sovereign country, would be a difficult transition. So do you agree or not agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that. There is a transition, of course, but the effect of existing and hosting more than 100 embassies in Quebec City, of having a voice at the United Nations, all those factors, according to the studies we cite that are very recent, are positive for the economy. That doesn't mean that there are not things to negotiate in a transition to be made, but that's what the studies we have at hand mention.
I mean, this is all on the premise that Quebecers agree to separate. So, Monsieur St-Pierre Plamondon, we know that support right now is quite low for separation. So, why did you want to present this budget right now? I think about what Quebecers are concerned with, and when it comes to budgets, I think they just want to pay their bills and get groceries on the table.
Yeah, and they want services. And it happens so that we send almost half of our tax income to Ottawa in exchange of little or no services, such as Health Canada, Transport Canada, Heritage Canada. And so the question is, if we get $82 billion in our budget, if we don't send it to Ottawa and we have it here in Quebec, would we make the same choices, or would we focus on services, essential services, such as providing healthcare, providing education and social services? So it is a relevant question, and a recent poll takes among youth, for the first time in a long while, says that the yes option is in advance, is ahead of the no for the youth in Quebec. So things are moving in the right direction. And I think financially it would be positive. We would save $12 billion over 7 years, according to the study that we just updated. It's been done 6 times before. And every time the conclusion was that Quebec country would be perfectly viable.
But every time it's been done before, it ended up in losing an election for the most part. Why would it be different this time?
Oh, I'm not able to predict the results of the next election. I'm able, on the other hand, to be serious and rigorous about the option that I put forward. If my party is dedicated at making Quebec a country, of course we need to have answers to fundamental questions such as what will be the financial picture on day one of that country, and the answer is better than the European average and number 2 in the G7 countries. It's an important answer. It doesn't mean it has a electoral or sounding poll impact, but it needs to be done in terms of transparency and seriousness of the enterprise.
Okay, I want to ask a question because I thought I heard you say this the other day. You acknowledged, I believe, that your proposal now is really not all that different from the other 6 times that have been proposed and failed. But the one thing that is different now is you point to the federal government's spending, right, and its effect on Quebec.
Yes.
If that's the case, right, the next poll suggests that this federal government may not even be in power by the next time there's an election. So does your plan at that point become moot?
No. So there are many reasons to become a country. The document says it would be viable to be a country. Now, in terms of the size of the public service in Ottawa, it grew by 40% in the past 8 years. But in terms of since the 90s, a ministry such as Health Canada has doubled its size since the mid-90s. And yet, try to mention one direct service to the population, and it's very difficult to find. So there is an issue of having two governments that do the same thing and then try to understand each other. And it's important then to notice that since the last result from François Legault, the last exercise in 2005, the size of the federal government makes it very difficult to get federal transfers in healthcare because they already spent that money. So instead of having surplus, like in 2005, the money is already spent in secondary missions and sometimes frivolous or ideological missions that are very far from education, social services, and healthcare that we need to provide here in Quebec City. So there are serious questions. I think minimally it triggers some thinking about how we would spend $82 billion differently instead of having two governments doing basically the same thing and trying to understand each other.
Predictably, the Premier, François Legault, does not like your plan. He doesn't think it will work, but he specifically highlights that a lot of people will lose their jobs. Do you have concerns about that?
Well, something just happened in the Salon Bleu. So all elected members voted unanimously to a motion that says that Quebec has the financial capacity of becoming a country. So even François Legault voted for that. Even the Liberal Party voted for that. Now, in terms of job being lost, yes, it is the case, especially for Revenue Canada and Heritage Canada, for instance. There are 5 ministries that I identify where, obviously, if you had 2 tax income reports and you have only one, it's not logical to hire everyone who was managing the tax report in Ottawa. So we need, I think, to be very honest and transparent. It means that there are savings to be done, and it has some impact, especially in certain ministries, and that is all explained and mentioned very transparently in the budget we just published.
Okay, I want to, while we still have time, what is your message to Anglophone Quebecers who you know obviously do not support sovereignty? It seems to me you threatened the other day, I think you said this, I'm not sure if it was hyperbole or not, to take back the Royal Vic from McGill when McGill said it was going to cancel that French program because of those tuition hikes. So would other English institutions...
it's important, I didn't do that. I said it was unacceptable for McGill to retaliate by taking away a program for the French language.
And then you added the part about the Royal Vic.
Government, and then I asked the question, how would they react if we would be in a logic of retaliation? But I never suggested that it should be done. But the question is very relevant. I think around 15% of Anglophones are in agreement with Quebec becoming a country. My job is twofold. First is to convince as many Quebecers, English-speaking Quebecers, to join us. And second, for those who don't agree, to make sure that it's very clear that English-speaking institutions and the way we function right now will be the exact same context in a independent Quebec, and to make myself available, like right now, to answer questions and make sure that it's done in a fair, orderly, and transparent manner. And so that are the two objectives that I have.
Okay, let me ask this sort of as an adjunct to that. What about for people coming to Quebec under your, sovereign Quebec from elsewhere who would like to have the option to continue to educate their children in English? Would that be allowed?
It's interesting. I don't have an answer. I think the language regulation will change in an independent Quebec.
You think they will change?
I'm not yet committed. So, of course, as the leader of the PQ, before I commit, I need to consult. It's a democratic party and everything. But indeed, I think a part of the regulation in Quebec is the position of minority within Canada and within North America. We're only 2% of French-speaking citizens in North America. I think things change. If Quebec is a country, then there's no doubt that there is an English-speaking minority. It's a change of environment. So it's a good question, and I will have to come... in 2025, we published the Blue Book, so question and answers about an independent Quebec. And those questions, there'll be a chapter solely dedicated to English-speaking Quebecers within the independent country. And those questions will be answered. I think they are very legitimate.
Okay. I look forward to that. Yeah. I will add to that. What about Indigenous people then? Because we get texts.
Oh, yeah, we have a chapter on that, of course. But that's already been... I've published a lot already. So basically, you have the Indian Act under the federal regime. And that's not going to change. I mean, Justin Trudeau can dress up and can cry. And in reality, that law and that colonial setup will not change in Canada.
But what if Indigenous people want to stay part of Canada, and geographically speaking, that gets very complicated?
Well, what we're going to offer is the same financial support and legal environment for each nation, but we're also, that's the base offer, but we are also going to propose, with the help of the United Nations, to negotiate a new deal nation to nation. So to get out of the Indian Act and this colonial environment by negotiating as equals. And I think that's very important if we are genuinely aiming at a durable and a friendly, respectful relationship among nations on the territory.
Okay. We have to wrap up. I just want to remind you, you mentioned the other day about, Quebec would attract 200 embassies right away in a sovereign Quebec. I would point out there are only 128 foreign embassies in Canada, so...
Yeah, of course, but that's not... I'm not predicting 200.
You did say that.
The potential of 200, obviously, we'll get more than 100. How many of them? And the argument is to say, from an economic standpoint, when you host more than 100 embassies in Quebec City, obviously it has an economic impact.
Okay.
And obviously there are opportunities through the fact of existing, having your own brand, your own economic strategy, that will pay off. So that's the point. I'm not able to predict exactly how many countries will establish an embassy, but we can be sure that it's going to be the case of many important countries.
Paul St-Pierre Plamondon, head of the Parti Québécois. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
À la prochaine.